Welcome to this webinar or digital conference, whatever you would like to call it. My name is Lars Jacobsen. I'm the editor-in-chief of Computer World, and I'll be hosting this conference today for the next couple of hours. So we'll be looking into building the case for your SAP transformation. And SAP transformations are reportedly tough. I've talked to quite a lot of CIOs during my tenure here at Computer World. Some of them managed it all the way through. I think the longest record I've seen so far when it comes to SAP transformations is about 11 years from a retail chain here in Denmark. So there's a lot of work going into stuff like this. There's a lot of brain power, a lot of technology, and also quite a lot of strategy and quite a lot of different takes on this. So I'm very happy to be here today with T-Systems, who's going to take us through four different presentations today on some of the different topics and some of the different strategies that you can take once you are upgrading or re-engineering your SAP transformation. And quite often, as we'll hear from some of the participants today, it's not just about the technology, or almost never only about the technology. It's also about the business side of things and the whole process and management part of things. So we'll get right into it in just a minute. First of all, a few practical considerations. First of all, this is being a digital event, but we will still like to make it quite interactive. So if I'm looking down on my screen here on my left, it's because there are some notes here, and I can see there's a few notes about the sound, and we'll manage to sorry about that. Yes, we'll get the volume up a little bit. Otherwise, if you have any technical questions, as some of you already have, just feel free to write them in the chat today. Also, if you have any questions for the speakers today, feel free to add them to the chat, and I'll be able to take them in the Q&A part of each presentation here today. After the conference, we'll be sharing the presentations, and also we'll be sharing any feedback and a feedback form for you. So that should be about it. And of course, feel free to ask any questions, and my colleagues will answer you in the chat. All right, we'll move on because we have a pretty packed schedule here today. So Peter, welcome. And thank you for joining us this morning. You're the marketing director for T-Systems, and I know that you have commissioned some research into these SAP transformations. And I've had a sneak peek of some of the results, and it's quite interesting, some of the drivers and some of the inhibitors that are here. So you're going to share that with our audience today, and afterwards we'll have a few minutes for any Q&A and any questions that people might have for you. Perfect. So thank you, and the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Lars, and thank you for having us here, and good morning to everyone of you joining us from live and from abroad. As Lars mentioned, I have the pleasure of providing some indications and some results of a very fresh market research study that we have conducted across the Nordic countries. It's actually so fresh that I was about to say that the ink hasn't really dried up on the paper yet, meaning that today is actually an exclusive sneak peek on the results that we do have. So the analysis, you could say, of all of the data that we have gathering is something that is still ongoing, and we will turn all of those insights into a report that will be available here later in April. So if you're interested to get your hands of that report when it has been published, you are of course more than welcome to reach out either to me or to my colleagues, and we will ensure to get that in your inbox when we have finalized our white paper. But I think for today, let's keep the focus on the initial results that we have brought forward and would like to present to you today. So first of all, what is it exactly that we have done? We have commissioned together with IDC in terms of conducting an online survey across the Nordic countries, where we have gained answer from 400 respondents that are equally distributed among the 4 Nordic countries. The aim of this survey was really to take a finger on the pulse in terms of say how far are Nordic enterprises when it comes to their SAP transformation, what challenges is that they have encountered, and also for those that have migrated into S4HANA, what outcomes have they actually achieved from that. That was really the intention that we wanted to get out of this. If we look from the population that have responded, actually almost half of them represents very large enterprises with more than 500 million euros of revenue, which kind of have been the key target for us in doing this research. All of those that have participated, they are either directly influencers for the decision making of SAP transformation with the organization, or at least they are influencing the decision-making processes that are taking place. So that's a little bit about the facts behind the actual survey. We have divided this section up in two different pieces. The first section is about the expectations. So those who are not yet on SAP but are planning to migrate to SAP, what are their point of view in terms of when it comes to the challenges and the preferences when it comes to infrastructure. And the other part, which I will put more emphasis on today, are those who actually have done the migration. So what challenges did they see? What are the outcomes that they have achieved? Their preferences when it comes to infrastructure, and then we have some additional insights when we look into how do we actually measure success. What KPIs is it that organizations are looking into today when they have to evaluate their SAP landscape? But first, let's jump into those who are about to migrate. So if we look at the obstacles or the challenges that they foresee that they will encounter in order to implement SAP, I would say that there are two themes that comes out. And those are themes that we will see throughout the study here and the results. It's about the lack of resources, the lack of skills. So it both comes into competencies and actually the number of people who are able to take on and do the actual execution of the transformation and the preparation. That is a massive challenge ahead. And the other part is about system integrations, which is being perceived as a major challenge, which comes into, I would say, two things. It's about the customization of the SAP installations that there are out there in organizations today, but also, of course, that SAP as a central nerve in the overall IT landscape is, of course, integrated with a lot of other systems within your overall landscape. And that points to a major complexity when it comes to SAP and of course also when you have to plan for your migration towards S4HANA, maybe also towards cloud, etc. So there's a lot of complexity into it, and we have a lack of resources. This is sort of, you could say, some of the perceived obstacles and challenges. And in a minute we will see is that actually also is aligned with what has been, you could say, really experienced out there. Another topic that we ask for those who are planning to migrate is around the infrastructure. So what is their preference in terms of running their SAP workloads? And at least to us at T-Systems, and also personally for myself, we found some of these results quite interesting, because one might think that the move or putting your SAP workloads on the public cloud would come out in a much more clear picture than what the results actually indicate here. What we can see is a more moderate move towards the public cloud. And that was, at least to us, a quite large price, which means that enterprises still not migrating or still not running an SAP. They still plan, they still intend to run a significant amount of their workloads either on-premise or with a third-party hoster in some sort of private cloud solution or otherwise. So there might be reasons for that, we can come back to that, but I think at least these results are actually quite interesting to look at. So I think that's just to give you a little bit of hint, you can say in terms of what is it that organizations are expecting but not really have taken the full jump yet. And I think for the purpose of today's call, it is more interesting actually to look at those who have taken the jump. what is it that they have realized, and this is the thing that we now will jump into and go a little bit more into depth with. So yeah, real world experiences, of course, what we will dive in here to. So first of all, what were the main outcomes of modernizing your SAP landscape or adopting your SAP? And there are three themes that we could see that kind of stands out here in the results. Is an enhanced IT security, the processes around here. It's about a better performance and stability, but also around the customer or the end user experience that have been improved. And of course, that lies in the nature of S/4HANA, right? Which is a completely new user experience for those that are actually sitting and using the program on a daily basis. And that is, of course, also a factor that you as an organization need to take into consideration when you're planning your SAP transformation journey, is that it's a complete new look and feel for your employees. So how do you prepare them for that major shift from ECC over to S/4HANA? So that's a thing we need to take into consideration. But I want to turn your attention to another element, and that is one might expect that you could say during SAP transformation, what you would achieve is definitely a lower total cost of ownership. So it's cost saving. But our results doesn't indicate that. And does that then mean that the SAP transformation projects have failed? Well, not necessarily. But I think it is important to see that an SAP transformation is not necessarily a cost-saving exercise. This is a transformation about improving your business performance, about improving your business processes and your business agility. And those aspects need to be integrated into the business case that you build for preparing for your SAP transformation journey. And that will then determine the success of your transformation project in the end. So that's also, you could say, an interesting finding here. So coming then back to the challenges around your SAP modernization, it is a little bit about the same themes that I presented before. So the expectations actually equals to what organizations have experienced in real life. It is about the resource, the competencies and the skill or the lack hereof, or at least not sufficient enough of resources that hampers or challenges the SAP transformation. And then it's about the system integration. And there are, again, it's twofold here. It's about the customizations that have been made, the complexity in terms of migrating them, and the functionality hereof, but then also, of course, the integration into other systems that you have within your overall IT landscape. So they really come out here as some of the major obstacles that also have been perceived. So this is, of course, two key elements that you and your organization need to have in the back of your head when you're planning your SAP transformation journey. We ask those that currently are running on the ECC platform about if they have any concrete plans to upgrade, modernize, or change the SAP landscape within the next 2 years. And I think also that there are some interesting findings in here as well, because there are equally many that are going to, say, transform the core into S4 as their organization who's not going to do anything. Right? And the latter might actually become a risky strategy, because we are all aware of that SAP have announced that there will be a stop for support for the ECC platform within the coming years. And you can say, if we imagine the picture that many organizations, they postpone their transformation projects, then in the end, we will kind of have a bottleneck effect. And that means there will be too few people, too scarce resources in the market actually to help organizations to do the transformation. Which means, or at least the recommendation from our point of view is that companies should start planning for their SAP transformations. Equally, we also see there is a substantial amount of companies that will continue doing customizations and also look into their databases and also for entering new functionalities, which of course also could be related into the overall transformation or migration to S4 but that's kind of equally distributed in here. Then looking at the infrastructure, for those who are running on SAP today, we asked them, you can say in their perception of what are their preference for infrastructure today and how do they see it will be in 2 years' time from now. And just like with the expectations, it's kind of similar. It is a moderate move towards the public cloud. So we see, of course, there is a movement. The areas that will lose a little bit of market share, if we can say that, is of course the on-premise and the third-party data centers. In advance, of course, of some of the more public cloud solutions that are out there in the market. But it is not, you could say, a landsliding result hereof. It is like the moderate change. And there could be reasons for that. It could be concerns around security, compliance, data sovereignty that needs to be taken into the overall consideration when you have to look at your infrastructure setup. It could also be around all of those customizations that your organization have built. Maybe they don't work into the cloud. So there could be many reasons for that, but nevertheless, I think the findings here are that we will still see that a vast majority of the workloads will continue to be either on-premise or with a third party in here in the coming years as well. And that turns our attention a little bit into the KPIs. We really wanted to ask our respondents to the survey about, so how do you actually measure the performance of your SAP environment? And I think there are some quite eye-opening results here. First of all, when I look at this, the first thing I see is that the SAP environment remain to be seen as sort of an infrastructure setup, something that run and maintain. Is a classical infrastructure KPI or even SLA you can see on how we measure the performance here of. But as we indicated with, if you have to look at the success of your SAP transformation, you have to look at how the business performs, the business and how it really affects that. And therefore you need to actually balance out the KPIs on how you're measuring the success. And that means you need to have both technology, and you also need to have business-related KPIs in order to complete this measurement. And our survey actually indicates that only 41% of the surveyed organizations, they actually have a mix of both. So there's a large portion of companies out there that are looking at their SAP instance only from an infrastructure point of view. And then, of course, the bar at the bottom here, there are many companies there who doesn't even have KPIs yet, which I would say, at least if I was in the management of those companies, that would be a little bit worrying seen from my point of view. And that might also reflect a little bit on the latter part that I have brought with me to you here today. It's around the utilization of the SAP licenses. This is, of course, you could say, a major component into calculating your business case. Where do we have potential cost-saving activities that we can do in terms of the preparation in here? And quite staggering, we have more than half, they actually don't really know what the utilization rate is of their SAP licenses. Of course, that could be that either they don't know it in the role that they have, or they don't have the insight at all in the organization, or maybe they are not really willing to say it, or maybe feel a little bit embarrassed about it. But nevertheless, so we have a big gray area. We're not really sure of what to answer to this question. But nevertheless, even though for the other half of the results we can say now that 1 out of 6 companies, they have at least 10% idle licenses out there, and 1 out of 3 companies have at least 5%. So that means that even though that we don't have covered, you could say, the full aspect here, this is a clear indication of that there is a massive cost-saving perspective out there that you need to deep dive into when you're planning and building your SAP transformation journey, and see if that could not be some of the cost levers for you to actually complete the business case for your transformation. So I think those were the insights that we gathered out so far from the research. As mentioned, we are still analyzing the results, but I hope that you find the findings interesting, at least so far, and then we are looking forward to come back to you and give you the full scope when we are there.
Well, thank you, Peter. Interesting. It could be, as I said when I started this, it could be interesting to see the timeline. How long would a triple transformation project go? I know there's a lot of different scopes in there. There was some people just upgrading the database, some people doing the full for-HANA transformation and so on. So we have quite a few questions here from the audience.
Yes.
Then it's great, and you're actually a little bit ahead of time, so that's great. We have more time for a chat this morning. First of all, there was one of the really interesting slides that I think both caught mine and the audience's attention was the hosting choices. It seems like, dare I say, that the SAP users seem to be a little bit conservative when it comes to cloud, or has the cloud just been sort of overblown, everybody looking to the cloud?
Yeah, I think, what surprises us is that now we as an industry, we have been shouting around public cloud for I don't know how many years now. And therefore, also, I think it's reasonable. We can assume that one would choose, at least those who have not done the planning or the migration yet, that they would actually have a preference towards the public cloud. And the results simply don't indicate that. And I think, as I mentioned, there can be multiple reasons for that. Again, now we have to deep dive into what that actually could be. But you could say, if you imagine an organization that have done a numerous of individual customizations of your SAP estate, well, probably most have done in some way, degree or another, right? Well, are they then ready to be running within a standardized public cloud environment? I think that's probably some of the concerns that are running out there in organization. That's, of course, an assessment you need to do. The current state you have today, is it fit for the public cloud? And then you need to map out some different rules. If you really want to go to the public cloud and you can say reap the benefits of that, what does it then take for me to be able to do that? And that could be, as you indicate, Lars, maybe you have to take your roadmap and then divide it into different sections where we say, we start with a database. Then we look at our customizations. We maybe need to remold them before we can move it over. Or the other way, you have to say, okay, we take a greenfield approach. We start completely over from scratch. So there are multiple options, and you need to assess all of them to evaluate which one is the best for your company.
Interesting, and I'm told I'm a bit low, so I'll shout a bit. Maybe I need new batteries for my microphone. So I'll shout. You don't have to, Peter. Do you think maybe there's been a lot of focus on compliance and cloud, especially with the US versus Europe? Yeah. So maybe it's not fair to ask you to comment on that, but do you think that plays a little role? Now we're speculating as some of the answers you've got.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even speculate, because what we see in the market, I mean, outside of SAP, is actually there is a tremendous focus on data sovereignty. I think that means that company now really are focused on, well, my data have to reside at least within the EU, right? And now we also start to see that there are new solutions out in the market where you actually can ensure that your data, even though they are in a public cloud, they remain within the EU. Like my own company, T-Systems, we made a partnership with Google Cloud where we actually offer data sovereignty in Germany based on the Google Cloud platform. So the solutions are coming there because there is a demand in the market.
You can see the pledges from Microsoft, from Amazon, and from Google Cloud. They've all pledged. Yeah. It's yet to be seen if that is going to be accepted by the different public committees that's looking into this. But there's all right, great. There's also, I guess, a little bit about control, having control and feeling that you have the control. That might be the illusion of control when it comes to big SAP systems or any big ERP system.
Yeah, it could be related to that. It could be related to emotions or at least historicalization of how you're going to do it. But I think in terms of control, you can just as well be in control of your data as it is in the public cloud. I think that many cloud architects would at least have that argumentation in front of us, right? So then in that case, I would say then it's a conservative, as you say, if the control is in that matter, right? So again, it's a matter of assessing all of the options again, and we will come back to this. You also have different options within the public cloud, right? So there might be some options that are better fit for your organizations than others.
You'll dive into it. All right. One of the other questions that I've been, there was it's about a little bit about the cost. So is that something you have looked into, the cost? When is the cost?
Yeah, we have asked about the respondents and the total cost of ownership for the SAP landscape. This is actually part of the research we hadn't completed the analysis of yet, so let that be a cliffhanger to our audience out there. But also in terms of, you could say, we have to deep dive into, so where is it exactly then the cost savings can come from, right? We will come back to that.
All right, interesting. At least what you mentioned, the get an extra microphone now.
Yes.
Twice. Two microphones is twice as good. All right. So you'll get back to the cost saving, but you also mentioned the licenses. It's quite a big part of this. There's a good tip here for anybody watching to start looking over your unused licenses.
I think that would be a quick win, wouldn't it? I mean, it is of course to make an assessment of, what is your utilization rate today, and then make a forecast of how many licenses do you need forward going. You might also need to consider, is that something you want to maintain yourself, or should you put that to a third party that could help manage that service for you, ensure that you always have the right amount of licenses available to you. But I think the point here from the research is, this is a low-hanging fruit that you must embed into your business case when you're looking at your SAP transformation project. It's unavoidable, I would say.
Interesting. And also, one of the interesting parts from your presentation was a lot of the different reasoning. I didn't see cost saving as one of the main parts. I actually think that's great. Going beyond the IT being something that just needs to drive down cost all the time. But there was the easier compliance. That was actually quite interesting. I think it was about 23% mentioned that the easier compliance, which is basically license to operate in these times.
It is licensed to operate, but I think also, again, if you should put one big fat line on something, SAP migration or SAP transformation, how we want to put it, is not you could say a technology exercise. It's a business exercise. It's about enhancing your business, and you need to keep that element into all of the aspects when you're looking ahead. And I think this is clearly said. It's not a cost-saving exercise by, you could say, lift and shift from one platform to another. This is not. It
never is.
No.
All right. So the last 2 minutes here. So if you were, with your background, you've been involved in quite a lot of IT companies, and not least presenting some of these solutions. So if you were, from your research here, or IDC's research you have done with them, you were to sell a transformation project, what would you say? What would you give the project managers out there, saying, okay, so now you need to, this is why. This is the time now, not in 2 years or 3 years.
Well, I think why the time is now, I think there are multiple reasons for it. You mentioned some of them. We have a deadline from SAP that is coming up.
Coming up quite fast.
Quite fast. We have compliance issues. I could mention compliance with sustainability and ESG components that we have. We have a customer demands about if the companies need to be able to react much faster, so they have to increase their agility. Here, cloud definitely is an enabler of that. We have to take that in.
So the IT deployment has been one of the drivers.
Yeah, and of course, and then you also have to be on your toes to keep up with your competitors and potentially new entrants coming into the market. So there's a lot of market factors that pushes weight on you actually to do that transformation now. So that's the external things, and then we all see now there are lack of resources, both within the organization, but we can also say within the market. So if everyone waits until the very, very final end to start the migration, there won't be enough resources in the market. And that will make some sort of catch-up effect, right? So therefore, the clear recommendation from us today is start planning today, if you not already have done so.
Start strategizing and building the case for your SAP transformation.
Yes.
That's perfect. It all fits together now this morning. Okay. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, Leslie.
All right. And we're moving on in the program now, because in just a moment we'll have Lars Bjørn Falkenberg, who's the Vice President of Sales and Advisory here at T-Systems Nordics. And I have to say I'm really sorry about the double microphones, but at least I was the one being very low, I'm told, but our guests, which is the important part of this webinar, went through quite well. So sorry about that, but 2 microphones now, I should be able to get through the rest of the session. So Lars, thank you for joining us this morning, and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And now we have 2 Larses in the studio, but I think we'll figure it out. We'll see how the audience reacts to it.
Yes.
You actually have the case for building your SAP transformation. Peter, he ended with some of the recommendations, but
yes.
You're going to pick up from there, and you have a presentation for us as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So at least a view on a case, right? Because what I'm talking to here would be sort of an overview of drivers and parameters of an S4 migration, and you could discuss whether you should call this a migration or you should call it a transformation. I guess we will get to that. So for the for basically where you took off with the discussion with Peter, is basically topics around this slide here. So what are the drivers? And if you look at the magenta here, the migration, that's something that has been forced upon us by SAP that decided to change the platform. This is probably not news to any of the anyone in the audience here. We also know that the date has been delayed or postponed from 25 to 27. So that's of course is a hard one. But there are luckily also other can say drivers of this migration or transformation. And Peter mentioned the competition as being one of them. And what we can see is that the competition is changing from focusing solely on products and price to also compete on supply chains and integration of supply chains, using, of course, technology for that, enabling real-time analytics, productivity gains, and just-in-time principles, which will lower stocking and all of that. Then, of course, there's the expectations of customers, and we know now that it's difficult to separate the expectations from consumers to business and to business customers, simply because that what we are accustomed to in our private life is also something that we over time would expect in our business life. And here, customer experience management ranks very high, and in general, building digital services that you are able to put into a can say sustainable run context is something that is also important here. And also the sustainability agenda is a significant driver. Being able to document your carbon footprint and the whole can say transparency in the supply chain is an important part of the sustainability agenda. And then not to forget that all of these aspects here, the competition, the customer demands, and the sustainability is something that has accelerated tremendously over the COVID-19 pandemic. Before 19, we were talking a lot about digital transformation, less about cloud. Now they go hand in hand, and it's accelerated big time. So while these are sort of the drivers, a migration can be approached from many perspectives, and what you can say here is that we can basically start with the conclusion here. They can be seen as a technology project, but should rather be seen as sort of a business transformation, as Peter also suggested in his presentation just before, in order to unlock the maximum ROI. So focus here on business processes and realigning business processes and organization, and it's obvious that finance is one of the departments, or one of the teams here that has that can be subject to the greatest impact, but for sure also other can say elements in the supply chain or in the value chain such as manufacturing, the whole supply chain, logistics, stuff like that. Product lifecycle management is also up for major impact here and improvements if we go about this in the right way and are looking to unlock the maximum return on investment here. And examples could be to take, can say, the finance department role. Historically been sort of looking at what has happening in the past and reporting that, sort of in terms of monthly reports, annual reports, controlling services, stuff, reconciliation services, managing cash and all of this, and liquidity, but to turn that team into be capable of predicting outcomes of business decisions would definitely generate a lot of value. The same with the ability to integrate supply chains with customer supply chains. I guess you could imagine all of the friction that would be removed in between companies, making manual working processes on both sides, so agents on both sides, completely irrelevant, but also unlock the potential in terms of ROI in improving value propositions, finding digital versions of value propositions, and drive up customer experience. So these are, you can say, recommendations as to and potential outcomes of looking at it not only from a migration standpoint, but from a transformation standpoint. All of this is enabled by the change in the logic of the system. From a classical ECC logic, which is, can say, I guess, logic for all systems that are developed throughout the 90s. Heterogeneous architecture is relatively often seen, in particular in companies of international shape and form, with subsidiaries around the world. All of this has changed into a homogenic architecture with a single database, a single version of the truth. And in-memory computing that allows for real-time analysis and exchange of data. You can also say that we come from a system-centric logic in terms of that changes in the organization has been driven as a consequence of the limitations of the system. So I guess we all know that for many years we have been discussing can say improving customer satisfaction and customer experience management. That's sort of an agenda that's been going on for almost 8-9 years now, been high on the agenda, but the ability to actually act on that agenda has been limited simply because of data silos and lack of synchronization of data and lack of APIs and stuff like that. That logic has completely changed in S4 to a customer-centric logic, focus on value creation, both for the business and for the customer. And that is hugely driven by insights, which will also be the sort of the second gen version of a new system here, going from what you can call raw data in silos that potentially combined into information. That's where we could basically take it from an ECC standpoint. If we would not put an analytics system on top of it, like Tableau or ClickSense or something like that, that would be where we were. With the new platform here, Insights is seen as an asset and sort of a license to operate. Also, what is the predominant sort of traits in terms of changes in the logic here? That is to go from supporting business processes with applications to basically eliminating manual working processes or manual interaction in a working process and automate it completely. So that's the situation. That's the change in logic here. And you could say that where does this end? SAP is talking about autonomous working processes, completely eliminating manual interaction in many aspects, and it's going to be very interesting to see how far we can take that. They compare this with autonomous cars. So if you can sort of train a car to navigate in a complex environment, you can probably also train sort of robots and agents in a computing environment to run a business at large. So looking at this in a sort of a typical enterprise architecture view here, we have changed the platform. It's now sort of a single database that can be hosted on any cloud. What we're hosting is a sort of an improved and modernized system of records in terms of improved application layer with a new GUI and user interface, focusing on optimizing working processes and eliminating manual labor. We are seeing now sort of a new coherent system of intelligence, which is where much of this is basically embedded in the functionality in the system of records, so in the apps layer, enabled by a simplified data model and data science and AI capability. And that again enables us to exhibit, digital services and self-services in the system of engagement layer, both towards, so we create, improved workplace efficiency and experience, but also customer experience. And this, of course, can be done by use of the, C4HANA suite in terms of CRM systems, web content management system, SAP for marketing modules, but also by utilizing the native apps development functionality that comes with the business technology platform that I will speak to later. If we look at mapping the differences here, I guess what's most prominent is the first, the top bar here. So all these machine learning and advanced analytics and digital assistant with voice recognition capabilities that is embedded in the system. It's the in-memory database that stands out here. It's the simplified data model and the intelligent processes here that are sort of driving the majority of the radical changes that we see and the changes in the logic. Now, while a lot of this is embedded in the basic functionality of S4, you can even extend it by integrating to the native business technology platform of SAP, which is featured here. Now, you don't have to buy all of this as a sort of a lump. It can be consumed as services one by one, basically, and will priced and licenses accordingly. It consists of a data management domain, enabling database and data management. It consists of a BI and an analytics platform, and it consists of this SAP native application development and integration platform, so platform as a service basically that we know from the cloud and hyperscaler providers, and then the intelligent technologies that can be consumed as microservices or low-code services in an open environment. And the open environment is a trigger for the next slide here, because you don't necessarily have to, or it's not the only option to go with SAP native technology here. The platform has been created so we can basically integrate to any other known technology. There are several hundred integrations, and many of these opportunities, and many of these comes as a standard, which makes the platform rather open. If you look at the whole circle here, all of these elements here can be seen as service elements in a complete installation, and all of these need to be a part of the strategy, starting with, of course, taking a basic stand when it comes to the migration strategy. Are we doing a brownfield, so basically only a technical migration of even maybe the business logic into a new platform, not utilizing the embedded benefit and advantages of the system, or are we doing something in between a new and an old installation, what we call bluefield, or a greenfield? Are we building a new installation? These are sort of a choice that needs to be made from the outset here, before we then advance into talking about digital innovation capabilities and whether this is something that should be sourced from native SAP technology as presented just before, in the business technology platform, or something that should be sourced and integrated to with third parties. It could be hyperscaler or any other provider here. And also what do we want to achieve by that integration. And all of this, of course, comes with decisions as to deployment. Is it on premise? Is it on cloud, private cloud, public cloud? And the deployment model, do we want to consume this as a service? So we are sort of going more standard, or do we want still to have this as a custom installation where we have the chance of working with the code ourselves? And then there's of course the choice of vendor landscape and ecosystem, because unless that you as an organization has decided to take all of this on yourself, or you have decided to give all of this to SAP as part of, could be SAP RISE, then you need to find partners for this, and that comes of course together with the whole exercise here. This sort of service stack here, or the parameters of a new migration, put into another picture here. It's actually a real-world example from T-Systems. I'll come back to that. But we can see here that you can deploy the platform, and not only the S4 HANA platform, but also the BV, the Business Warehouse for HANA, and the C4 suite on any cloud. And then integrated into the SAP Business Technology integration platform, or to the similar or equivalent technology like microservices or low-code functionality or AI services from, it could be Google Cloud, to build, you can say, use cases for innovation and transformation, digital transformation, in terms of improving customer experience, processes, the supply chain, stuff like that we talked about just before. And actually, the European Corona app, which you've probably heard of if you've been traveling over the last couple of summers here, has been built exactly on this architecture here in a sovereign public cloud on S4HANA, fueled by the business warehouse because of the logic that needs to go with that solution, and the C4HANA suite in the system of acting as a platform in the system of engagement to serve several million citizens in Europe under the EU can say coordination over the last 1.5 years, and that's a piece of technology that we've been building together with the German state and the EU Parliament in T-Systems. The business case as such, of course, consists of a cost element. That's the most obvious here, probably also the easiest one to quantify. And we could stop here if we would only look at this as a technical migration. Then that would be a typical TCO exercise. But ideally, we would sort of raise us into the next one, which is the business benefit, and try to quantify those and identify them. And here's all of the digital and the cloud stuff that we have been talking about here just before, that becomes relevant, because this is where we need to look at what technology can do for improving business processes, supply chains, integration into supply chains, and customer experience, and new digital services. And then there's all of the agility that comes with this as well. New consumption models, can say that pay as you go, outsourcing, opportunities for outsourcing and service models is something that also needs to be included in the business case here, and then of course a risk element. If you look at what to expect here, let's start with, in terms of outcome, let's start with the lower bottom here, where we can say that 50 to 60% of the value will come from improved business processes. That just nails the recommendation here in terms of maximizing return on investment, that you need to focus on the improved business processes. 30 to 40% of value will come from increase in productivity. And that's the whole, can say, data science and AI that will drive this, eliminating manual interaction into the working processes and the supply chains. And then only 10 to 20% of the value is created by cost savings, TCO reduction simply. Now, we could think of building a business case for the new installation. That, of course, is the major focus here. But we shouldn't forget that while we are building a new installation, we need to keep the old installation going via SAP ECC. And if you choose for a brownfield approach, meaning that we are just migrating to a new platform, you'll only have to build a strategy for preparing the old platform for what to come. That will sort of be around reducing data footprint and the likes, in order to not be on a new platform with a sort of extensive cost. But if you're choosing for a greenfield approach for the SAP for HANA as a SAP for HANA strategy, you will have sort of a full end-of-life installation running for maybe 5 years, and it could be beneficial to try to optimize that with a reduce number of vendors, so reduce vendor complexity, reduce the footprint of the licenses, so to what you absolutely need for that period of time in the remainder of the lifetime, and then develop a roadmap, potentially wrap that into a partner-managed cloud solution. Also look at the option of basically collapsing application management service and application operations and the likes, and all of the benefits and the cost savings that you get from this, that can be included in the business case and co-finance the transformation of the new into the new platform. Yes?
Interesting. Just,
now we have 2 mics, Lars.
yes, so many mics, and they keep having a little bit of problem today. So interesting, Lars. We're almost out of time, but one of the things I wanted to ask about is that obviously you've been working with the consultancy side of things. When are you typically brought in? Too late in the process, or early in the process, or when do you need? Because you mentioned some of this. You could do this yourself. You could be part of the SAP Rise, or you can get a partner trying to help you. Or rather, let me reformulate the question, saying, when is the optimal time to bring in someone like you, a consultancy like T-Systems?
Now, right now, yes, because there's so many variables here and parameters, right? And I would say there's not 2 migration or transformation strategies and processes that are alike. They're all different. They all have different technology components. They're all different from a SAP composition service perspective. They're all different from a vendor landscape perspective. The industries are different. The geographical footprint, the geopolitical situation is different. Stuff like that. So it's rather complex, and I would say that bring in advisors as soon as possible to help gain an overview. Of course, you can consult SAP, but I think it would be beneficial to have somebody who is independent of the software as such and the platforms, in order to also highlight what is available with other third parties.
So the earlier the better.
Yes.
Actually, is,
yeah, I think that's the obvious answer. Yes.
Yeah. And especially to get the outside perspective.
Exactly.
All right. Just a final question, because we're almost running out of time. You also mentioned in your presentation that we see a lot of different data models, a lot of different providers being integrated in, and that is part of the big SAP journey. A lot of the other ERP systems as well have gone from these big monoliths into something that is more API-driven integration. I've seen SAP installations with a Salesforce interface. It's getting quite. Everybody is sort of running with everything. Do you see this trend gaining traction?
Yeah, of course. It's a platform game, right? And you know that platforms are attractive if you are sort of exhibiting and offering a rich amount of services. So it's like your iPhone, right? It wouldn't be interesting if you would not have the apps.
Even though that Apple released it without an app store.
Exactly right.
It's crazy to think of.
So I guess we have seen that this kind of thinking that's been sort of impacting all technology consumption these days, right? So the more, the better. The winner takes it all.
And then it gets a little bit complex once you start integrating everything.
Yes,
so that's why you need a partner.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you very much, Lars.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll move on in the program. I know we're a few minutes behind, but I'll do my best to catch up in the end. Because now we'll be moving to external speakers. So hopefully there won't be any mic problems there. I'll just get my sound ready. And we should have Setnam.
Hi. Good morning.
And welcome. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. And I am actually able to hear you, so that's great. Good
well, great, thank you.
This is IT systems, right? We never take.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. So welcome, Setnam. I know that we've been hearing quite a lot this morning from Lars and Peter about how to build the case for the transformation, and now it's down to the deployment model. And you're going to help us choose the right deployment model once this transformation has been decided. So
yes, exactly.
Looking forward to this, and you'll share your screen, and we'll see the presentation. And it's over there, and then we'll have a few minutes afterwards to take any questions. So thank you once again, Sandro, and the stage is yours.
Okay, great, thank you. So in terms of the strategy around S4 and migrations and moving your landscapes to the latest transformation, the commercial or the licensing arrangements are very critical in supporting how you run. And this section that I'm covering this morning is to discuss the possible deployment models. I'm going to touch on the existing landscapes in terms of perpetual licenses and what that means, but also now look at some of the new options that have come out, both from SAP. We're going to be touching on RISE and also Partner Managed Cloud. So I'll move to the next slide. Typically in a perpetual setup, you have licenses that are procured from SAP. And then in terms of that, the customer then chooses or decides on who's going to be the hosting partner. So in this scenario, at the bottom, you can see the blue in representation for SAP, software and support procured from SAP, and then the customer would then make a decision as to who the hosting partner could be. Obviously, T-Systems have been a hosting partner for SAP for over 20 years now, so we've got considerable experience in this landscape. And in terms of the evolution of that, we've grown in terms of our development and our deployment of systems globally across customers globally as well. So we have an environment that scales predominantly in terms of both private and public. So the choice at the time, going over, just recapping the last 20 years, perpetual license that customers acquired, they would have the choice of running it privately in their own data centers managed by a third-party system integrator, or move to a hyperscaler at that time. The choice was theirs: either run it in T-Systems data centers as a private cloud, or even at a hyperscaler. And together with that, then the system integrator will provide the technical managed services. So that's the bottom segment of this wheel, and you can see the orange yellow dots just showing orchestrated by T-Systems. So traditionally, that's what the situation and the landscape of the current run environments would look like. Now, a lot of organizations, a lot of customers are also now obviously with the pandemic and the push on the digital economy, are looking at ways to innovate and take advantage of extending the functionality of SAP. So T-Systems have always been, as part of a hosting provider, always been advising strategically against with cloud strategies, and also advising around cloud migration strategies as well. So we have a very strong cloud and hosting capability, as you know, and as part of that, that enables us to then work with the customer to ensure what the ideal hosting provider or public cloud would suit. Traditionally, this is also factored in terms of the customer's own presence and nuances as to what deployments they currently have to date. And as part of those, if they've adopted an Azure platform or if they're using AWS or even Google Cloud, what does that mean in terms of their SAP footprint, and how can we help in helping them manage that transition? So from a cloud migration and cloud advisory services, we provide that. SAP AMM, Application Modernization and Management Services, we provide the capability to be able to go above the basis layer and actually do the SAP application management layer as well. So as being a very strong hosting provider, we also provide technical managed services, and then on top of that, we can also provide application management services as well to support the development and the future deployment of SAP within the customer's environment. And then coming around the wheel, S/4HANA transformation, Lars has already touched on what are the areas strategically you need to look at and what are the use cases. And also in terms of the timeline, Peter touched on some of the industry drivers that customers and the feedback that we've got from customers as well. S4 has considerable benefits in terms of a much more unified ERP with business analytics built in and a very sexy front end in terms of the Fury, dare I say it, in terms of that. And that will give considerable acceleration in business adoption and the way technology, certainly from SAP, is being adopted as well. And there's various scenarios that can be used in terms of edge transformation, moving to S4, in terms of building the capabilities out, but also sweating the assets as much as possible of what the customers have already built up as the ECC environments as well. So obviously the choice to move to S4 in terms of timing, we've also advocated that this needs to be prepared and started as soon as possible, because it will take some time to migrate and move to S4. And then last but not least, digital innovation. The pandemic has seen that the acceleration of digitization means that customers are wanting to take advantage of this phenomenon in terms of accelerating the use case for digitization, streamlining, automating, including RPA, machine learning and AI into their daily operations as well, to show savings and to show increased innovation to their customers and suppliers and partners as well. So this, in a traditional landscape, is where certainly T-Systems, as we call it, Magenta, can help with. So in a perpetual environment, obviously the SAP licenses come from, you're procured from SAP, and then we are the hosting partner on that. So this scenario, the implications are, SAP and ourselves, tailored configuration and code, options in terms of the customers, where you want to land with this private, hybrid, and public. So the options are completely, all three environments can be positioned. Security and privacy is obviously key in terms of that. And then from a T-Systems perspective, we're very proud about our security services that we provide for all our solutions. And then orchestration, we orchestrate the environments, manage those, as I said before, in terms of the hosting ability of that. So I'm just going to move on to Rise now. Rise has obviously been launched over a year now. And in terms of that, the model has changed slightly differently. As you can see in the wheel now, from an SAP perspective, it's the scenario whereby SAP provide the software, the support, and the infrastructure, and also the technical managed services. So Rise is obviously out in the marketplace now, and a lot of customers are looking and evaluating Rise where that can fit. Obviously, this will be on a hyperscaler strategy together with the customer's decision of where to do that. But also SAP are looking for partners as well, partners that have been intrinsic to the customer's engagement to date, and also have a good industry experience in delivering that capability or that hosting capability to the customer. So you can see there's still a role to play in terms of the SI above that, and that still leverages our capabilities and our strength in terms of what we can deliver as well to complement RISE. So it is just to reconfirm, SAP's, it's a standard offering in terms of RISE. It's based on the S4 implementation. And what that means, it will give you standardized approach in terms of the technology stack, obviously from a cost savings and scalability perspective. And the concierge services is what SAP classify as the Magenta services that can support and be wrapped into the certain solution to support the RISE implementation. And we're seeing various conversations taking place around RISE. A lot of greenfield opportunities are being discussed. Obviously, it's quite a large undertaking. If customers have very complex environments, how do you fit a standardized product into that particular landscape? And SAP can certainly look to supporting that. But from an SI perspective, T-Systems have been there doing that for the last 20 years and very knowledgeable about how those environments can be supported. So it needs partner collaboration, and SAP have quite openly said that this cannot be done in isolation. It does need partner collaboration, and obviously our longevity with our partners and our industry knowledge in those particular, and also understanding the customer's business is very paramount in helping RISE and the adoption of RISE across the landscape as well. That's a quick introduction to RISE, and then particularly, obviously, the scenario here, you see the wheels are slightly changing in terms of the way the models are being deployed as well. So that just gives you an illustration of that. And then what I wanted to touch on as well was Partner Managed Cloud. Now, this is an offering that SAP launched several years ago, and what it provides is basically a partner managed cloud. It's a flexible and scalable subscription to both the partner's capability as well as the SAP licenses and the offerings that you require to adopt as part of your business going forward. So it's in conjunction with SAP and with T-Systems. And in this scenario, we would be the contracting entity, and we would basically procure the licenses on your behalf. The partner would manage those licenses and mitigate any need for things like audits and third-party license requirements and things like that. So T-Systems would be the contracting entity. We would be able to negotiate on your behalf and provide you a single OPEX model. So the consumption of that can be then driven via an OPEX solution, where we've seen customers want to move away from the challenges of business models whereby they're very restrictive in yearly figures, to be able to have a much more of a subscription move away from CapEx to an OPEX model. So in terms of partner managed cloud, we talk about access over ownership. So in terms of the licenses, obviously, as I said, the partner would buy those licenses on your behalf. So T-Systems would own and run those, and you would have access to the complete portfolio of SAP licenses, both cloud software and on-premise software as well, so bundled into one price. So what we're seeing is that the impact of the digital economy, as I touched on before, requires new ways of working, and in order to manage this dynamic and rapid changing business models, demands in terms of the models have changed, and also the way consumption behavior is changing as well. So we've seen a considerable move towards an OpEx, obviously hyperscalers, and the way naturally people are consuming services are much more on an agile manner. And we're seeing the economics also shift towards that as well. So PMC has been resonating in the marketplace, and SAP are still offering PMC going forward. And what that means is that, you know, customers cannot no longer justify large IT spends or an extended time to value. So being able to have agility, being able to see and develop and quick wins in terms of that, you need a very agile deployment model to support your business run or your ERP run to get to that intelligent enterprise. And here the mix of licenses, both in terms of functional fit, means that you have that flexibility and that agility to consume those licenses as and when you need to. So in terms of business fit, it's much more robust in terms of being able to react to the changes, both in terms of your challenges, market factors, and legislation and governance. And then financial fit as well. It means in terms of cost savings, effectively, we can look at the future demand that you have in terms of the licenses and the term license that would go against the PMC. Look at that and look at how that can be then factored in over the length of that term to have a consistent, repeatable payment model that the customers would subscribe to. And then effectively, coming back to the PMC model, which can include components of RISE as well. So from a system integrator perspective, we can still offer RISE within a PMC model. But effectively, what this means that we could then provide the entire services. It's a one-stop shop. It's a single contract, complete end-to-end services from T-Systems to deliver the functionality that you require. And obviously we've touched on the timescales and where you need to get to. And this also then enables you to plan over the length of that term to how you migrate. And we will work with you to actually create a roadmap and a journey of how you get to the version of S4 or RISE that you want to land on finally as well. So it means collaboration, working together with the partner, building those tailored services, and accelerating any innovation that we can do as part of the service as well. So the good thing about PMC, it's a price, package and configure. It means that you can then, obviously with the different license models within SAP, both in terms of user base, CPU, revenue-based licenses, you can agree a single metric that will then be how you consume those licenses, and it simplifies that complete consumption of those licenses across the whole estate. So the simplification is key, and obviously making sure that you've got that longevity. We've spoken at the start around resourcing as well. So PMC and the partner managed cloud, it means that you've got resources to hand that can migrate you through this transition phase to get to the final landings scenario that you want to aspire to. And in terms of that, T-Systems then will have the resources to support you. So there wouldn't be no impact in terms of resources going forward as well. So that was just a quick overview in terms of some of the deployment models. The PMC, some of our largest customers, global customers, are using those, and it can scale quite easily across any industry as well in terms of how this license model can be adopted.
So, well, thank you, Satnam. It's interesting. I see a lot of industry moving this way to more towards everything as a service. But one of the sort of the pushback the other way is sort of the loss of control. What would you say to people who are worried about the loss of control, whatever that control might be? That's always a little bit hazy, right? The concept of having control.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Lots of it. I mean, it's a trade-off in terms of agility, flexibility, and loss of control. Certain environments and certain areas of the business might be susceptible to moving to those. So people are freely moving to hyperscalers in terms of supporting the strategy as well. So um, it is a horses for courses type of scenario. You need to understand which landscapes you're willing to migrate, which ones will support. What are the trade-offs in terms of the benefits of moving to that? Do they have the internal IT resources to maintain and manage those environments? Are they looking to streamline the IT and give that to a partner that can manage that reliably for them while they concentrate on their business? So that's, I think, one of the trade-offs in terms of certainly what we're seeing as feedback from customers as well.
So really a question of choosing with your eyes fully open and saying, okay,
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
It is no different than having the security part of your strategy, to choosing the risks and minimizing it or
Absolutely.
or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. A final question is these consumption-based models have been gaining a lot of traction over there. There's nothing new. It's been gaining a lot of traction. And I often hear jokes at how much will it cost? Well, you'll know at the end of the month. That is sometimes a bit of a challenge when you have budgetary constraints or somebody, the CFO, giving you trouble at the end of the month. So how much do you need on the customer side to be able to control and having this overview, maybe this illusion of control when it comes to consumption?
Yeah, and the good thing with PMC is this is a consistent figure that then would be agreed as part of the negotiation between all the three parties. So it'd be a predictive model in terms of you'd know exactly what you'd be paying each month or each quarter. So in this format, it's negotiated and agreed. You agreed the licenses up front in terms of both your current demand, returning any shelfware that you've got as well. So it enables you to factor in any shelfware that you've got, but also you can add in any future demand. Then that's all thrown together. That's then evaluated. And then as part of that, you get a single repeatable figure that's actually then delivered. We obviously wrap in our hosting services wrapped into that as well. So from a customer's perspective, you're consistently aware of the repeatable figure that you've signed up to, and you know that there won't be no variations in that. So in terms of consumption, it's more of an OPEX model, but it's a repeatable OPEX model.
No nasty surprises then.
No nasty surprises in that, because never.
So one thing you can be sure of is death, taxes, and the PMC. So it's good to know. Well, thank you, Setnam, for first of all your presentation, also for answering my questions here at last. We have to rush on in the program because we have Martin Jones ready here in a moment. But thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And we'll rush on, as I mentioned in the program, because Martin is already ready. So thank you for joining us this morning, Martin.
Thank you very much.
We have sound on, great. So that's a good start. So
yeah, that's good. Can you see my presentation as well?
There it is. Everything seems to be working. Excellent. So I'll leave just the stage to you, and then we'll take a few questions afterwards, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. So today I'm going to talk about how to succeed with your transformation strategy. So what we've created overall is the Magenta pathway to your ERP future. So it contains lots of steps along the way. It's all about preparation. So imagine a chef cooking for 100 people, and that he needs to know how many staff he wants, the menu that they're going to cook, and the food and everything to order in advance to get the right prices. And that the same logic can be applied to this, where we have an overall strategy, and preparation, as we've heard today, is key for how we go on. So what I'm going to take you through today is the 5 fundamental steps, and that which is the first part of this journey to really get the key areas of preparation to take you on your cloud journey and also your S4 journey. So we can highlight the key stages here from steps 1 to 5, and 6 to 11 are really the operational steps to then take you on the S4 part, and then the first 5 really are those fundamental steps for the journey that you start. So if we start along the journey, the first one we have is the S4HANA simulation game. So the key thing that SAP have done is they've said that customers need to move to S4 by 2027. But the amount of people that we actually see in the industry that have never actually seen an S4 system, they're still using ECC. And SAP is saying you need to move to this software, yet you've never actually seen it. So the ability of this is to actually play a simulation game with approximately 20 people within your organization. We split you up into 4 or 5 groups, and really look at running different transactions within an S4 system. There's 6 different business scenarios now. This is really going on from where it used to be, where we just had one scenario. So you can look at all things around MRP, sales and distribution, all of logistics, and all different areas within that. So it's one of the things that we do is like running a game of running a bottled water company for sales and distribution and MRP. And really, you can get the understanding and the look and feel of the S4 system. And we found that quite a lot of businesses and that now actually understand how different an ECC system looks and how it's really going to affect their users as well. Because you're going from standard screens where you would probably use 6 different screens for one area. And now a lot of that information is all on one screen. And so it's going to be a very different user experience. The second step we have is the initial assessment. So in this step, we really look at the whole of your business, the areas around the systems that you have today, really looking at landscape rationalization, making sure that you have all the right systems that you want, and also really looking at how you can consolidate some of those systems down. A lot of companies do a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and then what they do is they end up with several ECC systems. We have customers today that have 4 or 5, even 6 SAP systems from when they've taken over other companies. And it's really looking at that rationalization and being able to merge those systems into single systems before you actually take that journey into S4. Creating your business blueprint is one of the most key and important areas that we recommend all businesses do. And that the problem that we find is that SAP have obviously said that we need to customers need to move to S4, but in some cases the customers do not understand the business benefits that this can actually bring to them, and it's very difficult to get funding within your organization to be able to move to S4 when you don't actually understand what the business benefits are going to be. And most companies at the moment are really pushing back on SAP based on the fact they're being pushed to actually move to a release, which they're quite happy with ECC as it is today. But what this can do is actually take the ECC systems that you have today, really look at the processes and the functions that you're running within that ECC system, and then really look at how that transforms into an S4 system. So what we can do is we can map completely the transactions you're using today within ECC and actually define that over any single release of S4 that's available to you. You can then see all the business functionality that is changed, has been removed, and it really shows you the journey that you're going to have to take to be able to move to S4. Some customers and that really push back on this because they think it's going to be a lot of work, but they still don't know exactly what that work can be. The S4 readiness report, which is run by SAP on the systems, doesn't really give you clarity of what is changed within an S4 system, which is actually a 900-page PDF document to document all the changes in the S4 releases based on an ECC system. So it's a lot of information for customers to really look at. So what we try to do with this is to actually show this, the differences, and actually build the business case to actually show you where your ERP future should be over the next coming years. And this can even be up to the next 5 years and up to 2027. The key thing, though, to do is look at this now, because this is the key thing to actually drive your future over the next 5 years. Cloud strategy. Now, this is quite important with a lot of customers because they don't know which cloud to move to. We find this all the time with talking to customers, which cloud is best for an SAP system. Well, the answer to that is any of them, because the key thing is it's really dependent on your business functionality and where your business needs to be within a cloud strategy. SAP is a very large application which sits within all of the clouds and even private clouds with other companies, and it doesn't really matter where that SAP system sits. It really depends on where your ecosystem sits for the rest of your systems and what your business strategy is then for the cloud. And that you can put SAP alongside any of those systems then within the cloud that you wish to go to. And you have to take into account things like network traffic and how that's going to work within your current ecosystem. So there's no point in putting SAP on AWS and then putting the rest of your systems on Azure, for instance. So you really need to look at the business benefits and what's available within the clouds to actually define where you want to put your SAP systems as well. And cloud assessments and that which can actually be done for this can actually really show the best microservices and everything which you can actually use to be able to do that cloud strategy. Data strategy. This is one of the most important areas within ECC and moving to either the cloud or to S4. With ECC 6, SAP said to everyone that you don't need to do regular archiving because the relational database now manages the system really well and it can cope with the large volumes of data. The problem that we have today is that now customers need to move to S4HANA. You need to use HANA appliances, which are 4 times the cost of standard virtual machines. And therefore, if you're moving all of your data across, you're now going to get an extremely large bill for just the infrastructure of moving those systems across. The other thing that is now clear within the industry is that with software vendors, they're now actually taking the licensing fees and that for software which you need to use for moving to S4 or for other process optimization areas and test management areas. And they're actually charging customers based on the production database size. And therefore, if you then have a large system, the system pricing for the licensing is then extremely expensive. What you need to do from a data strategy point of view is really look at the data within the system. A lot of customers do archiving already, but there is also around 35% of the database is actually basis data, which doesn't need to be in the system. And a lot of customers don't actually remove this. Looking heavily into the actual database and really looking at the data that you don't need within your system anymore is key. And that we work with a lot of customers and that from a data strategy point of view. And some customers normally remove at least 50% of the database. We have worked with customers that have removed 90% of the database and archive that all off of the system, reducing the size of the landscape, and then also being able to move to S4 or the cloud in a more cheaper manner as well. Putting a really good archiving strategy in place before you move to the cloud and before you move to S4 really helps as well. You can limit the database growth to less than 2% versus standard 15 to 20% increases that you would normally see month on month. Within a HANA in-memory system, this is really key, and that because otherwise the data grows exponentially, and then your hardware requirements also grow exponentially as well. Again, it's more extended cost, which your companies really can do without. And this is why the preparation of all these 5 steps is really key for moving to the cloud and S4, because it really uncovers all the hidden costs that you're going to find along the way. And it really achieves a lot of cost saving. It also reduces time as well for when you're actually migrating to S4. The less data that you have within the system gives you less downtime when you're actually moving as well. So an overall data strategy is really key within these areas. So thank you for your time today. That was all the key strategies which you need for the pre-steps of actually moving to the cloud and S4.
There's actually a question about some of the steps here, or the magenta highway towards a successful transformation. There's a question about what is the reason for why to touch upon the data strategy after the decision about the cloud strategy? There's a little bit about the reasoning about the different steps.
Well, the two can be done in the same time, really. Yeah, we've just tried to really put them along the way. From a data strategy point of view and a cloud strategy point of view, it still really doesn't matter which you choose first, and that from the disk strategy within the cloud providers is all really the same, and a lot of the costs are really the same as well. So you're not actually probably going to move to the cloud at that point, but you're actually choosing your strategy. So these are really the pre-steps before you actually start to move, and you can do them side by side, really. So you don't have to do them one after the other, but it's just really a clear way of showing that these are the first 5 that you need to do before you'd actually start to move.
Interesting. And the final question here for me is, one of the first slides that Peter showed us this morning was about the some of the drivers and inhibitors and some of the decision makers in this report you have had made. And that hosting came up, and there are a few questions I've gotten today have been about the hosting part. And the question I asked Peter about this morning was that if maybe SAP customers are a bit more conservative, or this is a trend. So could you help me round up this webinar about touching about the subject and a few words on this cloud versus non-cloud versus these complex landscapes that we see with a lot of SAP installations. So where's this heading from your consultancy position?
I think it's very difficult at the moment. I work with a lot of customers in the industry from obviously from T-Systems perspective, but I also belong to a lot of user groups and things like that. So I work with a lot of other people along the same lines as me and other companies, and it's really difficult at the moment because a lot of companies can't make decisions on where they want to go, and the whole piece around where does SAP fit best, and that is always a problem as well. And you've got quite companies really working in silos, where they're just focusing on SAP, or they're just focusing on all the other ecosystems. There's no one looking at everything together. And it's obviously with SAP, like we said, it doesn't really matter where it goes. But then everyone says, well, the cloud's going to be cheaper. And this is the key problem that we're finding now is customers that have already moved to the cloud have gone, well, it's not cheaper because my data is really large, my systems are large, and they're growing at exponential rates. And now my month-on-month costs and that in the cloud are really expensive. And this is why, so a lot of areas in that we find is that customers want to move to the cloud and they need to move to S4. And these are 2 key strategies at the moment. What we've tried to do is actually create the Magenta pathway to actually give some of the other areas, that all the pre-steps to try and save that cost. And that because I've been working with SAP now for over 20 years and been in the IT industry for 30. And it's really showing that everyone is looking for cost saving. But then looking at the cloud as that cost saver is not correct, because unless you actually make all your systems cloud fit and cloud ready, and really look at your ongoing strategy. It's even more needed now that you have a data strategy, and that, so that your systems don't grow exponentially, so you don't see exponential cost, and that because we're finding customers who've moved to HANA already on like on-premise database data centers, and they're seeing that they've had to increase their capacity by, say, 50% for their infrastructure. Well, if you're then doing that in the cloud, that's even more expensive. And then if you don't actually get a handle on all of that, then it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So this is why we've tried to put extra steps along the way for customers to really get the benefits of everything, but also see that there is a lot of planning that you need to do now. Like Lars said earlier, when you asked about when do you need to start?
Exactly.
Well, you need to start now, and that because potentially a lot of these things are going to take you 2, maybe 3 years, and that to actually see some really good benefits and cost reduction. So if you don't do that now and you wait until you actually have to move to S4 or you move to the cloud, then you're actually going to see that the costs at that point are going to be exponential from where you are today. Whereas if you actually start planning now and looking at the whole of the strategy, then you'll be able to actually realize some of those cost reductions, and then also make it that when you actually move to the cloud, then those systems, your landscape footprint overall is going to be smaller, and it's going to be easier to move as well.
Interesting. Very good answer. Thank you for that. It's I've seen people rush into stuff like this. Been with the IT industry quite a lot of years as well. It's interesting, and also often because there's not the willingness to sort of grab the bull by the horns. I've seen CIOs, they set up almost an exam table, and then you have to come and then you have to plead the case for your exception to the standard SAP system. And that might sound harsh, but it actually works. But
we are seeing so much pushback in the industry at the moment of, I don't want to move to cloud yet, I don't want to move to S4. And it's going to be a problem with resource and that later on in the next 5 to 6 years, where people are suddenly going to go, well, I have to move now, and there's not going to be resources available, and their companies aren't going to be in a fit state to be able to actually look at that strategy. So it's it is
get these enterprise architects and all the other competencies that you need. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We have to close, but very interesting talk. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for me, it's just a matter of rounding off now. I hope you have gotten some interesting insights. We'll be sure to share both the recording but also the presentation here from today, so you'll be able to see some of the insights that Peter started out with from the IDC report, and you'll get some of the other pointers that our participants, our speakers today have joined. So it's no easy fix, unfortunately, but as soon as you start thinking about these things, as soon as you talk about and visualize and strategize about your footprint in the cloud, what parts should you run yourself, what should you get help from, for example, from T-Systems, and what is maybe SAP RISE or other solutions that is ready for you. Hopefully this was interesting for you, and I hope that you also fill out the feedback form that we will share with everybody who has joined us here today. Other than that, I'll just say thank you for joining us this morning. Sorry we ran a little bit late because of a few technical difficulties and a lot of microphones on me, but I hope you'll join us at another Computer World or T-Systems seminar in the future. But thank you for now, and have a good day.